Welcome to the Virtual Shift, a show looking at the seismic changes happening in healthcare with virtual care at the epicenter. Join me and my guests as we look at key cultural and policy shifts impacting how providers, payers, and patients connect, as well as how care is being reimagined both for today and the future. Hello, and thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Tom Foley. You can learn more about this show by visiting the program on healthcarenowradio.com, and be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter at FoleyTom, and the hashtag The Virtual Shift. Today we have a great guest on board, Nelson Gomes. He is the Senior Vice President of Development at Medicus IT. Nelson, welcome to the program.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me.
Awesome, Nelson. It's very interesting. So, the virtual shift, we typically talk about virtual care and different aspects of who's creating the shift. And I think Medicus IT might bring a unique shift to the market. And that shift, as I see it, is relative to infrastructure. Yeah. So let's first tell us about Medicus IT, and then we'll get into some of the uniquenesses.
Yeah, so Medicus IT is an organization that was formed back in 2004. And in the last 3 to 4 years, we've been bringing healthcare IT leaders all across the country together. I was part of an M&A back in 2019 that brought us really together. So look at us as 6 groups that came together with a focus in healthcare IT all over the country. And our really sole purpose is really to be specialists in healthcare IT. So in medicine is full of specialists, right? IT is typically not. So Medicus IT, however, is the healthcare IT transformational specialist. That's how we see ourselves. Entirely focused on helping healthcare organizations make the most out of their technology. We're not your typical break fix. We feel as if organizations this day and age, especially in healthcare, need to transform how their businesses work. We're both seeing a lot of different shift and changes within the space, and it's about how can we be more transformational in these organizations that ultimately are going to impact patient care and that patient experience. So that's a little bit of background about us. Been in business for a long time. We have providing services for over 5,000 providers in 38 states. And last time I checked, I think we're very close to about 32,000 healthcare professionals that we serve across the country. So we have our hands full.
Very interesting. I look at and when you talk about technology being a part of the transformation, I couldn't agree more. And ultimately, one can't be successful unless a provider has that that infrastructure that as their pedestal to growth, right? Because in today's day and age in healthcare, it's very tough to grow without adopting a robust technology platform.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I think that some of the things that we also need to consider is that strategic focus on what does it look like not only a year from now, but 2 years and three. Let's go back 2 years, Tom. The way that doctors interact and treat patients is totally different from today than when it was back then, right?
Yeah.
And what drove that was need. And I think that with need comes innovation, and with innovation comes new ways of leveraging technology to provide that better patient experience and ultimately better outcomes.
But what you guys bring to the table as well is that innovation can't come unless you have a stable base. I don't want to pound 100%. That to death, but it can't come. No. So if you have an infrastructure out there and you're relying on cousin Johnny to come fix it, right? As happens often in the healthcare space. One, you have a very specific focus in healthcare, and that gives you a much different discipline because at the end of the day, I always say it's got to work, period. I mean, you're a 24/7 type of operation, so your infrastructure's got to be there.
So standardization comes to mind, right, when it comes to the unification of infrastructure. So for me, standardization equals efficiencies. With those efficiencies, especially in an instance where organizations are growing and transforming, and to be able to deliver better care, if you don't set that precedence of standardization across the board, you're not going to get those efficiencies. you're not going to have ways to stabilize that and optimize the environment from a technical standpoint. So having that standardization, and we've seen it, that is going to really impact on how you're going to have more efficiencies from the clinical workflow side, from how the end users are using the technology, from whether it's adding a patient record or looking at a CT scan from their PAC system. Having that unified base or infrastructure standardized is I think it makes a hell of a difference. And it takes some time, right, to kind of get to that place. But I always tell a lot of the clients that we're working with now, as you and I are seeing, there's a lot of more consolidation in the industry, where we're seeing a lot of different organizations kind of come together. So having them come together and unify them, it can be challenging. So being able to understand that baseline to say, okay, here's where we are and here's where we need to go, to have that plan and to outline that plan, I think is critical. Because sometimes what we're seeing is, people are just, turning their wheels and nothing is really happening. And then it's going to impact them from a outcome standpoint. And what we want is make sure that we have that standard. So understanding where you are and where you need to go from a technology standpoint is where I think it's crucial in this day and age.
I couldn't agree more. And that little discussion there, I mean, to me, kind of validates why Medicus IT is ranked the top 5 healthcare specific managed IT company in the country. So you're absolutely correct. And at the end of the day, whether you're a small, it doesn't matter the size of the organization, and it doesn't matter the way in which you were formed. Mm-hmm. Meaning, to your point, mergers. Sure. and acquisitions. The unification of the infrastructure is critical in order to have, again, it's all about growth. And growth is not necessarily always about additional revenue, although we're in business, so that is a key part of it. But the point there being is, again, it comes down to simplicity of the infrastructure and reliance on that infrastructure, again, in order to do what you need to do. So any thoughts on that before we change topics?
No, I like I said, I think that, having that unification and setting those standards, and if you start from there, I think is going to set the groundwork for you to be able to grow and transform, your organization. So that to me is setting that baseline to get to that next level.
So how many providers did you say Medicus works with?
Across the country, 5,000.
5,000? And they're all different shapes and sizes?
Yeah, different specialties,
from in a particular market, like SNFs or large ACOs, IPAs rather.
So we're in those different types of organizations. We are working a lot with FQHCs in the community health center space that are really reliant on expertise like ours to really leverage what we can do so that they can provide those services to those different communities. So that's a space that we're having a focus in. We're doing a lot in different specialties such as orthopedics and urology and gastroenterology, more than ever, Tom, because we're seeing a lot of investments being made where, like I had mentioned before, that they're bringing them together. Urgent cares as well. Even in the dental space, we're seeing a lot of these large DSOs come together. And I think what they're trying to do is be able to capture a base in a market where they can bring these patients together and serve them better. And I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of, the investments that they're making in some of the technology, telemedicine, virtual stuff that, that you guys are doing, and you're doing a great job at. And I think we're going to see more and more. And it's quite honest, we're seeing that shift. We're seeing the shift in how a lot of this technology is being adopted. You and I go back several years, and I remember in the days where EHRs were being adopted, and it was like, a lot of different EHR organizations were out there to provide that service, right? And we were, educating and bringing some awareness to the community. I think we're in that phase now. Look at all this different technology that you can use to really provide better patient care. I mean,
Yeah.
just the other day, I was talking to a client of ours, an orthopedic group that adopted some RPM, some remote patient monitoring hardware and platform. It's built into the braces that the patient is using. So now they can check range of motion without even seeing the patient because it's all electronic. So the technology is really impacting how patients are being treated, and more importantly, on the outcome. So I'm excited about what the industry looks like.
Well, you're raising a great point, because not too long ago, to your earlier point, is that infrastructure was an internal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did my practice management platform run? Does it run? Does my EHR run? Does my PAC system run? Do they integrate, right? That's all internally focused. With healthcare now being extended into the home, and you have hospitals a home, it is necessary, and you have remote patient monitoring and telehealth in and of itself. The technology actually is a lack of access to care often has to do with a lack of access to technology from the consumer's perspective. But yet, but even that, when a practice wants to offer remote patient monitoring, you have a medical device that's in the home used by a consumer. And then that device has to communicate to your remote patient monitoring platform, and oftentimes that syncs with an EHR. So there's a lot of interoperability there, a lot of data flow there. But again, it's not, if you're internal, organizations typically have control over that infrastructure. Now, when you have a single provider and they offer remote patient monitoring to their 2,000 patients, that control is not lost, but it's more challenging to provide and support. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just like anything else, before jumping into any type of platform, I think it requires some really strategic review and planning. And we spend a lot of time with a lot of our clients in that phase, where we want them, to include us in those types of conversations strategically. And that's part of some of the offerings that we provide to our client base is that strategic advisor to really understand, well, what are you planning to do, and how is that going to impact some of the technology infrastructure that you're bringing up. Right. So we want to make sure that we provide a full scope to those clients that are looking to go in, whether it's RPM or they're going to telemed, whatever that platform that they're going into. From a business perspective and from a finance perspective, it may make sense, but we want to make sure that they're taking into consideration any additional investments that need to make in infrastructure, in connectivity, in training. That typically sometimes they don't have that awareness. So where we come in is we provide that awareness to say, hey, based on what you're trying to do, here's some of the things you need to take into consideration. So there might be some good conversation to say, okay, something we didn't consider, let's continue to revisit. So that evaluation process, I think making sure that IT is involved in that decision process, it may make sense from a business perspective, but take into consideration some of the things that that the organization needs to consider to build upon that type of platform that they're trying to implement.
Yeah, I like the way you come at it, because I always tell my sales folks to stop selling and to be a strategic advisor and put some creds on the table relative to understanding their business before you go in and try and do something with them. So at GDMD, as you mentioned earlier, when we provide remote patient monitoring and virtual care software, we just don't provide the software. We can if you want, but at the end of the day, if you're talking about the home, hypothetically, you're talking about what's that health station, right? You might have a phone, but you might have a flip phone, right? So that's not really the type of phone you want to do a virtual care encounter on, and it's not really and it wouldn't be a device that you would use within remote patient monitoring. So the point there being is, now I have this health station, and let's just say you're a hypertension patient, that's your chronic condition, I'm going to provide you a health station. I'm going to provide you a blood pressure cuff. And then that device, that health station, let's just call it a 10-inch tablet, will need some other software like mobile device management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
to the earlier point, if it's broke, hypothetically, someone like your organization has to have access to that device, at least for the purposes of, with obviously the patient's consent and all of that. But the point is that you need to have access to help fix it, right?
No, I agree, and I think that those types of things need to be put into consideration when you're going through this process, right? As a strategic advisor to a lot of our clients, we want to be sure to look at what they're trying to do, to bring in the right partners that make sense that we can partner with. One very similar to Jeannie, to be like, for us to understand this is what we're trying to do. Well, perhaps let's bring in Jeannie to have that conversation, because it really applies to what you're trying to do, and I think to give them that perspective changes the game. And what we like to do is treat it as we are vendor agnostic, so we're not going to push one over the other. It's what's best for them, based them being the practice, what's best for the practice based on what they're trying to achieve. And we're going to play that evaluator to identify who are the best partners we can bring into the mix, and help drive what they're trying to do. So it's about the devil's in the details when you're doing it. Go back to the EHR days, right? They used to buy the EHR.
Do we have
They didn't think about all that stuff. Tom, they didn't think about. So
people don't realize that when the HITECH Act was passed, and we rushed into meaningful use stage 1, 50% of all EHR deployments were failing. That's where the state of the industry was back in 2007, 8, and 9. So I hear you loud and clear. So we're too smart now to go back to and replicate that challenge, right? Yeah, but sometimes a combination of the guidance on the technical infrastructure, coupled with what the business is trying to do, and realizing what virtual care brings to the market. Oftentimes we hear from a remote patient monitoring, the classic response is, I can't afford it. 1, 2, I can't deal with all that data, right? And it's just too complicated, right? Mm-hmm. But the reality is that, a home station, as an example, with the tablet and the medical devices, that's paid for. If you're registering a patient into a remote patient monitoring platform service, that's paid for out of the CPT codes, right? So, and then that data, an organization a provider can partner with organizations to be that monitoring front end, and then the only patients that the provider truly has to see are those that have been escalated, right? Blood pressure's out off the charts, got to get this patient under control. Doctor, you got to step in, right? So there's a merger, if you will, between the infrastructure side, the business side, and the clinical side, and those enhanced services that, again, someone like Jeannie would bring to the table as to how we often will put in those platforms that allow that provider to be successsul.
Yeah, and
do you see it differently?
No, I don't. In my 25 years of experience working in the healthcare business, I've learned one thing. It's about educating the end users. And by educating the end users, the providers, to help them clearly understand why this is beneficial for them, for the patient, and for the practice. So taking that time to do it as to the why. Why is this going to benefit you? Ultimately, why is this going to benefit the patient? And show them that ROI. Not just an ROI from an investment standpoint, but the ROI on outcomes. We can have another conversation about value-based care, right? That's going to impact value-based care. We're seeing more and more organizations adopt value-based care, going down that path. This is, in my opinion, is going to be part of that, is to be able to provide better outcomes by leveraging technology, by leveraging platforms like Genie MD to be able to provide better care. Chronic care is going to continue to happen. We have to figure out a way to best serve those patients. You and I have a technical background, but you and I have been around the block for a long time, and we know that ultimately it's how is it going to impact patient care and that patient experience.
That is what it's all about right there. It's all about how it's going to impact healthcare, and it's got to be frictionless. And the technology from the external perspective needs to meet the patient where they are.
Absolutely.
Making it difficult. Let me undo my backpack here and get my bag of medical devices out, and let's set up so I can do this measure. It'd be too hard. So
for sure.
frictionless, and meeting them in their path of along that path to wellness is really where the solution needs to sit. And all more important again to this extension. I remember I spent a week. We met with a client, one of the largest health systems in the Bronx, New York, and ultimately what they did when they registered a patient in a telehealth was they brought the patient in. Obviously, they have to see the patient before they register them anyway. But the point is that they registered them while they were in person. They got the smartphone out. They tested it right there. I raised that because you called out education, and education internally as well as education for the consumer who's going to be ultimately asked to embrace this.
Yeah.
Remote patient monitoring is thought to be a new means of delivery of care, and with 6 out of 10 adults having at least one chronic condition, that could be very true. And with the home being that setting of care, the hospital at home being a new approach that's quickly establishing some steam, so what's that home look like, right? I just can't say, hey, I'm going to ship you something, open up the box and it works. It's there's got to be some level. There's got to be a process. There's got to be a level of intelligence, to your point, of instead of just rushing to deploy. You got to let's rush to educate first.
Agreed.
And then move from there.
Thoughts? Yeah, I agree I couldn't agree with you more. I think awareness, really educating the consumer, in this case the patient, I think is going to be a part of the process. And I think that COVID has taught us how to really innovate. And I want to share a story with you that to me that triggered innovation with a doctor's office down in Florida, where they had a large practice. Think about 30 doctors. And at one location, they owned the building, and they wanted to see patients, but they didn't want to bring them into the reception area. So what they did was they transformed the reception number into additional exam rooms. Now, it doesn't end there, right? The conversation came to me from the doctor, said, hey, listen, we're trying to reinvent ourselves and how we see patients, and we want to be able to interact with patients without them even entering into the building to the reception area. And I'm scratching my head. I'm like, well, how are you supposed to see them? Well, we want to use a patient engagement type of platform to be able to communicate them. And what we're going to do, we're going to put doors from the outside of the building right into the exam rooms. So to me, that was innovative, totally thinking outside the box. You have an appointment, you park your car, you check into the application. Once you check in, they're going to say, once exam room number door 15 opens from the outside, open the door and go in, and the doctor will see you. That's innovative. That's what I think COVID really helped, was really innovation. I think that we were used to seeing a certain way of care, and I think because of COVID, and I think a lot of the physicians really got into survival mode. Is how do we continue to keep our doors open to see more patients? And I think survival triggers innovation. Yep. And this is one of probably hundreds of stories that are out there on how medicine and the way we practice medicine changed and will forever change, in my opinion. I love what you guys are doing. I think the platform is really challenging the status quo and how to deliver healthcare. And I love to see more of that. I think we need more of it. This country is a country of innovators and come up with fresh ideas, and we need more of those to provide that care to patients all over the country. So kudos to you guys and for what you've been doing.
And the same to you guys, Nelson and Medicus IT. Awesome discussion. I really appreciate your time. And let's have you back on in the next couple months. And
I'd love to.
See how,
I love
doing.
to talk about this stuff. So thanks for having me, Tom. And I look forward to seeing you at a trade show possibly near you.
Awesome. I'd love to see you again. It's been a long time.
Take care, buddy.
Nelson, I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the show sponsors, both HP and Intel. HP Engage long lifecycle products provide the stability, safety, and security you need, plus flexibility and performance designed for today and tomorrow. As well, Intel would like you to know we're going above and beyond together with new standards for business with the latest Intel vPro processors, delivering what IT needs for performance, security, remote manageability, and stability. And be sure to check out the program page on healthcarenowradio.com. And remember, connect or follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter @FoleyTom, and follow the show's hashtag, The Virtual Shift. I'm Tom Foley. Until the next shift.